Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to be here to speak to you. But it's not only a great honor, it's really interesting for me. And I am glad to be here because I think we need such conferences. We need these conferences in which you speak about different perspectives. And I want to speak today about the German perspective. Well, first, I want to speak about the institutional guarantees of judicial independence we have in Germany. It's more or less the same what you have too. Then I speak about current challenges and then proposed amendments in Germany, and I end with a conclusion. In Germany, our subject is very important because we have big problems at the moment. Very often in the last 5 years, we had elections and it went wrong. People have been suggested for a judge at the Constitutional Court, and then the political parties disagreed. And they didn't elect these people. And this hurts the people, of course. And therefore, we have a big discussion, and I think it's interesting to speak about Germany. And the second point is, if we wouldn't be member in the European Union, we must change our system of election for high judges. Nevertheless, they examined, the Commission examined the situation in all member states, and they said the election of judges in Germany is not how we think it should be, but it is acceptable. And I think this is important to know. There are not strict rules. The system must be acceptable. Now I start with the first point. Judicial independence guaranteed in the German Constitution, we call it the Basic Law, is a cornerstone and an essential component of the rule of law. I speak about rule of law, but I mean that's Rechtsstaatsprinzip. It's not the same. I hope you know that. And democracy. From a German perspective, these guarantees must be viewed in the context of the experience of the Nazi era, during which the judiciary was degraded into an instrument of the Hitler regime's dictatorship. The constitutional guarantees are intended to create regulations for Germany that would prevent a dictatorship. However, the independence of the judiciary also serves to protect individual citizens from state arbitrariness. It is a central prerequisite for ensuring that individuals have a fair trial and independent and impartial court, and that judgments are based solely on the law, not on political or other external influences. Judicial independence is guaranteed by Article 92 and 97 of the Basic Law, and Article 9 describes the nature of the judiciary with the concise words, judicial power is entrusted to the judges. Article 97 mandates that judges are independent and subject only to the law when administering justice. This principle is enforced through both professional and personal independence safeguards. First, the guarantee of professional independence essentially means that judges are bound only by the law and free from instructions. Bound only by law means that judges are not subject to instructions from the executive, legislature, or even senior members of the judiciary. In brackets, in theory. In theory. That's what I can say about the practice in Germany. Very often, senior members of the judiciary, of course, they take influence. and sometimes they must take influence, because if not, the decision would be wrong. Exclusivity of jurisdiction means that other branches of government cannot interfere in court proceedings or overturn judicial decisions. Rulings can only be challenged through the proper legal appeal process. Judges have control over procedural decisions, such as the order of cases, the schedule of hearings, and which witnesses to hear. Furthermore, the judiciary has a monopoly on adjudication, making it a key component in the separation of powers. The guarantee of personal independence. To safeguard the personal independence, judges enjoy personal independence as they are protected from disciplinary consequences, such as removal from office, dismissal or transfer, with narrow exceptions like reaching an age limit or a change in legal constituency, or leave of absence which could be used to sanction judicial decisions. While the specific benefits have evolved, judges receive an adequate salary, which is higher than the salary of administrative persons in Germany, and benefits granted by law to ensure their dignity and maintain their independence. A third dimension sometimes mentioned is institutional independence, meaning the organizational separation of the judiciary from the legislative and executive branches. However, neither Article 92 nor 97 of the Basic Law, any other provisions of the Basic Law stipulate that the judiciary as an institution must be independent. This is discussed very much in Germany at the moment. The exercise of personal authority and decisions regarding appointments and employment within the judicial administration are not exercise of judicial power as defined in Article 92. Nor can a strict separation of the judiciary from the other two branches be derived from the principle of the separation of powers. Rather, several constitutional provisions clearly demonstrate an interrelationship between the branches. For example, the judges of the Constitutional Court are elected by the federal legislative bodies according to Article 94. Similarly, the election of judges of the federal courts is the responsibility of parts of the legislative and executive branches. And this is written in the Constitution, what is important here. Furthermore, while the ECJ requires that courts exercise their function in complete autonomy, in a German case concerning Administrative Court of Wiesbaden, the court clarified that the mere fact that the legislative or executive branch is involved in the appointment of a judge is not sufficient to create a dependency on that judge or to raise doubts about their impartiality, provided that the judge is not subject to any pressure after their appointment and is not subject to any instructions in the performance of their duties. So maybe we would have a chance to get into the European Union with our system, but I'm not so sure. My conclusion: it can be stated that the independence of the judiciary is seen as vital for the legitimacy of the courts and the enforcement of the rule of law itself. While judicial independence is strong, the administration of the judiciary remains under the authority of the ministries of justice, which can be a point of discussion regarding the balance between independence and democratic accountability. Current challenges. Judicial independence is universally recognized, and the necessity of its institutional guarantees is beyond question. Nevertheless, current challenges exist. These challenges traditionally concern the right of the president of a court or a superior judge to issue instructions to a judge. While disciplinary measures are permissible, the judge's decision must not be influenced. Recently, the election of judges to the highest federal courts, particularly the Federal Constitutional Court, has been the subject of much discussion as political parties exert considerable influence over these elections. Critics see this as a gateway for political interference. These challenges demonstrate that judicial independence is a fragile asset that must be continuously defended and strengthened. Based on this objective, the question of how judges should be selected and whether new regulations are needed for filling judicial positions to solidify judicial independence is currently debated. Judicial independence does not fundamentally preclude disciplinary measures. However, disciplinary measures may not be used to influence a judge's future decisions. Psychological influence aimed at instructing or influencing future judicial conducts is also prohibited. Permissible, however, are routine or ad hoc audits that serve to monitor the proper conduct of the court. The decisive factor in assessing the admissibility of a disciplinary measure is the objective assessment of whether the independence of the judiciary is compromised. The presiding judge exercises supervisory authority over the judges of the court. Within the scope of this supervisory authority, he is empowered to object to deficiencies in case management, such as a significantly below average workload or an unreasonably slow processing of cases. For these cases, we have a lot of decisions of the courts. However, he may not give instructions on how to decide a specific case or which legal opinion to adopt. Case law emphasizes that while judicial independence is broadly defined, it does not exempt judges from the duty to perform their duties properly and expeditiously. The judge in question may appeal the disciplinary measure to the disciplinary court, and I think this is important, that he can go to the court. Second, according to Article 94, the Federal Constitutional Court Act, the Constitutional Court judges are elected by the parliaments, by the Bundestag in Berlin, and by the Bundesrat, representatives of the parliament of the Länder. We have 16 Länder, and in Germany, this is strange for foreigners and it's strange for Germans. Normally, the Länder are responsible for legislation, and only in some cases which are especially noted in our constitution, Berlin, the parliament of whole Germany, is responsible. So this is a little bit strange, but this is a development we had. That's a historical thing, and it is discussed. But at the moment, normally not Berlin, but the 16 parliaments are responsible. And therefore, both together, they have to elect. The parliamentarians who enact laws decide on the appointment of the individuals who will later decide on the constitutionality of these laws. And that's a problem. because they elect persons knowing that they will control their legislation later. The election requires a 2/3 majority in each case to ensure balance in the senates and to prevent a political bias in the Constitutional Court, such as is currently observed in the US Supreme Court. And here we need 2/3, because we have the AfD, right wing. Part of them are Nazis, part of them not. But this is a problem, and therefore they decided 50% is not enough, because it's possible that we have a shift to the right, and then we will have a government which is not democratic, and therefore we need 2/3. Is this a manipulation or not? I think this is a general rule for the future, not for the past. And if it's a general rule, it can be accepted. The appointment of judges of the Supreme Court, the Court of Justice, Administrative Court, Fiscal Court, Social Court, Labor Court, is decided by the federal minister in Berlin, responsible for the respective subject area, together with a judicial selection committee. We call it Richterwahlausschuss. This committee consists of the ministers of the 16 countries responsible for the relevant subject area and an equal number of members elected by the parliament in Berlin. This cooperation between the executive and the legislative branches is intended to increase the legitimacy of the election and strike a balance between different political forces. The process is presided by the involvement of the presiding council of the Federal Court, for which the candidate is to be elected. So the court itself has influence too. The presiding council issues, in particular, a written statement on the applicant's personal and professional suitability, which, however, is not legally binding. In practice, it is. Judges deemed unsuitable by the presiding councils of the Federal Supreme Courts will not be considered in election procedure. So I think it's a strong influence of the court. The appointment and promotion of judges at the federal state level is carried out differently in the various German states. In the federal state of Hessen, for example, there is a judicial selection committee as a special constitutional body. The judicial selection committee consists of 7 members appointed by the state parliament, 5 judges, and the president of the Bar Association. Other of the 16 states also have such judicial selection committees with varying compositions and responsibilities. So, I think I don't have too many time. How many time do I have?
8 minutes. 8 minutes.
8, okay. So we can go to the next point. That's proposed amendments in Germany. The election of judges by the legislative and executive branches is repeatedly criticized because the judiciary is held in a state of multifaceted dependency. The legislator's participation in the decision-making process for judicial appointments indirectly controls the judiciary, and this jeopardizes the independence of judges and contradicts the constitutional principle of the separation of power. The introduction of judicial elections by the people, as is the case in many US states, is not seriously being demanded in Germany. While such an election would create direct legitimacy through the people, it would mean that judges would constantly have to consider the interests and opinions of their constituents in order to be re-elected. Furthermore, a genuine campaign for a judicial office requires the commitment of financial resources which can lead to significant dependencies. In contrast, the demand for judicial self-governance through a judicial administration council which would decide on the appointment of new judges and the promotion of existing judges has found broad support, especially in theory, by professors. However, this model of judicial selection is problematic because practical experience with judicial self-governance has repeatedly led to significant issues in Germany. It has become clear that the judiciary is by no means free from personal connections and preferences. And therefore, if you ask professors who have been judges, for example, at the Constitutional Court, they say, in theory, they are right, but the existing system is the better one. And most of the high judges see it in this way. And they say it's better if we do not have too many influence. It's better if the parliament has the influence, so personal relationships are not so important, and you cannot, choose your friends and say, I want to help him. Furthermore, it has been proposed that leadership positions in the judiciary be filled only for a limited term. Such models exist in France and Belgium, for example. However, the introduction of such a model in Germany is problematic because individuals holding leading judicial positions are not judicial managers, but are simultaneously independent judges at the same time and members of the presiding body. If the executive branch could fill these positions after the expiration of their term, this would constitute an impermissible infringement on the core of the independent presidential structure of the courts. The judge would no longer be independent and could be removed without a court decision. And this would be problematic. My conclusion. The current system, with its extensive and differentiated checks and balances, has proven its worth overall. This argues against fundamental changes. Any reforms should remain within the established structures. In the appointment of high-ranking judicial positions, election by legislative bodies with a 2/3 majority, presided by a review by a high-ranking independent expert commission of judges, has emerged as the gold standard in Germany. The differing developments in the federal states, in the Bundesländer, in the 16 states, with or without judicial selection committees and with varying tasks and compositions of the bodies, also are acceptable. They reflect federalism and the judicial traditions of the federal states in Germany. A shared responsibility for the rule of law across all three branches of government is the crucial guarantee that the existing systems will continue to provide the framework for an independent judiciary in the future. The 2024 Rule of Law report of the European Commission examined developments across all member states, both positive and negative. The Commission's result was the justice system of Germany overall continues to perform efficiently. Therefore, in Germany it is proposed, and I would propose, don't change a running system. Thank you very much.